A man who thought silence was strength, until two fragile syllables changed everything. Ma, ma. The sound was small, fragile, and almost impossible to hear, but it stopped Harry Rutherford cold in the doorway. His coat was still draped over his shoulders. His briefcase hung stiffly from his hand. For one suspended second, he forgot how to breathe. His twin boys, the children who had never spoken, never stood, and never reached, were facing the maid. Jessica was kneeling on the hardwood floor, yellow gloves still on her hands, arms gently extended. She wasn't rushing them. She wasn't crying. She was whispering a lullaby Harry hadn't heard since the night Caroline died. Mason's fingers trembled as they stretched toward her. Jace's lips opened again. Ma. Not a reflex, not a cry, a word. The boys shifted forward, unsteady, determined, not toward their father, not toward the therapists who had come and gone, toward her. Harry's heart pounded so hard it hurt. He had built this house into a monument of order, clean lines, quiet halls, no chaos, no hope. Hope was dangerous. And yet, here, on his own living room floor, the impossible was unfolding. His sons were calling someone, Mama. Jessica didn't turn when she sensed him. She stayed grounded, voice soft, steady, as if even a glance might fracture the miracle. Harry's grip tightened on the leather handle in his palm. Everything he believed about prognosis, paralysis, permanence, it was slipping. He stepped back before either of them noticed him. The door closed with its usual gentle click, but nothing felt usual anymore. The mansion stretched around him like armor, polished, controlled, silent. It had been this way for 2 years, ever since Caroline's delivery went wrong. The boys had arrived early, oxygen deprivation, neurological damage. Words like non-verbal and non-ambulatory floated through every consultation. Harry signed every check, built ramps, installed equipment, hired specialists who spoke gently but believed very little. He wasn't heartless. He was tired of believing. Routine was safer. Then, 3 weeks ago, Jessica Martins arrived. Early 30s, quiet, efficient, referred by someone he trusted. She cleaned thoroughly and kept conversation minimal. She was meant to fade into the background. But the boys didn't treat her like background. They followed her with their eyes. Their breathing slowed when she sang under her breath. Their hands twitched when she leaned close. The nurses called it stimulation, coincidence. Harry had accepted that explanation until today. He stood in his office now, replaying the moment. Ma. They hadn't said it to him. Not to the neurologist with his glossy slides. To her. Jessica. The word pressed against his ribs like something alive. From the window, he noticed the curtains in the east wing fluttering. Windows open, fresh air drifting in. The play area, once unused, looked almost welcoming. He walked past Caroline's portrait in the gallery hall, stopped, studied her painted smile. "Did you hear that?" he murmured. The canvas offered no answer. When he entered the nursery again, the twins were asleep. Jessica sat cross-legged nearby, writing quietly in a small notebook. "What were you doing?" he asked. "Reading," she replied. That wasn't reading. They respond to rhythm. His jaw tightened. "They spoke." She nodded. "They don't understand what that word means," he muttered. "Not yet," she said gently, "but they're trying." "They said it to you." Jessica held his gaze. "They said it to the person who's been holding them, feeding them, talking to them even when they couldn't answer." Her tone wasn't defensive. It was simple. "You're hired to clean," he said. "That's what the paperwork says." "Then stay in your lane." A quiet stretched between them. "They don't understand contracts, Mr. Rutherford," she said softly. "They understand presence." He turned away before she could see the flicker in his expression. "What else?" he asked. "Mason's practicing mouth shapes. Jace turns toward sound now. It's small, but it's real." "And you didn't think I should know this?"
I didn't think you'd believe it." He looked at his sons, breathing deeper than before, resting peacefully. For the first time, he didn't see Jessica as staff. He saw the only person in the house who'd spoken to his children like they were capable of answering. He left without another word. That evening, Harry didn't retreat to his office. He sat in the hallway and listened as Jessica sang.
Somewhere between the third verse and the quiet that followed, he realized something startling. For the first time since Caroline's funeral, thinking about her didn't tear him open. It just made him wonder what tomorrow might sound like. Jessica never altered her rhythm. She folded towels precisely, hummed the same soft melodies, left careful notes for the nurse, but the house shifted. The air felt lighter. The boys tracked her movements more boldly now, and Harry began lingering longer outside the nursery door, not as a guard, as a witness. The nursery, once sterile and whitewashed, had started to soften. Toys weren't arranged for aesthetics anymore. They were where the boys had left them. Books stayed open, not shelved. The curtains were drawn back just a bit more each day, and in the corner near the small upholstered chair no one had used in years, Jessica kept her notebook. Inside were pages of observations, Jisoo's fingers curling when she touched his palm, Mason humming faint and off-key when she played certain songs, small, strange patterns she was still learning to name, moments she didn't want to lose to forgetfulness or skepticism. She didn't try to convince anyone, not the nurses, not Harry, not even herself. She just showed up every morning, every moment. She talked to the boys like they were listening, read to them like they might understand, sang lullabies like the words mattered, massaged their hands gently before nap time, rubbed lotion into their legs, brushed their hair while whispering stories about frogs and lions and stars that blinked back. It's okay to feel.
"Safe things, baby," she told Mason once, her voice barely above her breath. "You're safe." What she didn't know was that Harry was in the hallway, frozen, listening. He didn't mean to be there. He'd come upstairs to drop off a signed consent form for the occupational therapist. But when he heard her voice, something stopped him. Not the words, the way they landed. Jessica wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was just there, fully, as if nothing in the world mattered more than the twin boys in front of her. Harry stood in the shadows for a long time that day. That night, he pulled up the estate's internal security logs and skimmed back through the nursery's footage, not to invade, but to understand. He watched Mason tracking her across the room with his eyes, watched Jasso open and close his hand every time she paused near his crib, watched Jessica lift each boy gently, slowly, speaking to them like it was the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't therapy, it wasn't science, it was something harder to measure. He turned off the monitor and leaned back in his chair. For the first time in 2 years, he didn't feel in control, and for the first time in his life, he didn't want to be. The specialist arrived on a Monday. Dr. Kelman, Harvard credentials, unflinching jawline, one of those men who always smelled faintly of dry cleaning and eucalyptus. He'd been recommended by a neurology contact in Zurich, someone Harry trusted, or used to. He stayed only 30 minutes. Jessica was not invited to the meeting. Harry sat across from Dr. Kelman in the drawing room, sunlight pooling across the herringbone floor, untouched tea between them. The doctor flipped through the twins' medical history like it was a disappointing portfolio. "I see the caregivers have logged recent vocal attempts," Kelman said without looking up. "Unintelligible sounds, possibly imitative behavior." Harry kept his face still. "They reached for her," he said quietly. Dr. Kelman paused. "Who?" "The maid." Now the doctor looked up, his brows lifted slightly. Not mockery, not yet. Just the subtle adjustment of a man preparing a professional response. "Mr. Rutherford," he said carefully, "I understand how these moments can feel transformative, but we must stay grounded in neuro-reality. These children have significant motor impairments, non-verbal, likely non-symbolic cognition." They spoke. Reflexes, Kalman replied calmly. Breath against the vocal cords, a pattern your brain is desperate to interpret as language. They reached for her. They'll reach for sound, for vibration, warmth, not necessarily meaning. Harry's jaw tightened. The conversation ended 5 minutes later, politely, with handshakes and scheduled follow-ups. But that night, Harry didn't sleep. He paced the hallway outside the nursery, with the doctor's words crawling through his skull like static, not necessarily meaning. He walked to the living room, turned on the stereo system for the first time in months, and stood there, unmoving as the speakers hummed to life. He played nothing, just let the wires warm up. And then he heard it from the hallway. A melody, not the stereo, not the nurse. Jessica. She was singing. He followed the sound. It came from the kitchen, dim, quiet, just a low golden glow above the sink. Jessica stood barefoot, swaying slightly, holding Mason in her arms like she'd done it 100 times before. Jasso was dozing in a nearby carrier, half tucked beneath a fleece blanket with stars on it. She sang slowly, a lullaby too soft to place at first. Then Harry's breath caught. He knew that tune. Caroline. It was hers. Not a popular song, not something you'd find in a baby book or a parenting blog. A tune she'd made up while pregnant, simple and strange, with 3 little nonsense words that only she ever used. And Jessica was singing it perfectly. Harry stepped into the room, his voice a whisper. How do you know that song? Jessica turned, not startled, just still. I found it, she said. Where? She reached to the counter and picked up a slim, worn notebook, pages fragile at the corners. She handed it to him like it was a child. She had tucked it behind the bookshelf in the nursery, Jessica said. There are recipes, notes, a few poems, and the lullaby. She titled it, For When I'm Not There. Harry couldn't move. His hands trembled. He opened the notebook, recognized Caroline's handwriting instantly, slanted, neat, always blue ink. There it was, the lullaby, his wife's words in her voice. Jessica watched him for a long moment. I wasn't trying to overstep, she said softly. I just thought the house needed music again. Harry didn't reply. He couldn't. His throat was too tight. He looked down at Mason, asleep against her shoulder. One hand rested over Jessica's heart, like it had found its home. The tears came slowly, like his body had forgotten how to let them fall. Not loud, not broken, just real. He sat down on the floor beside the kitchen island. The marble was cold against his back. He didn't speak. Jessica didn't offer words. She just sang. And the mansion, for the first time in years, didn't feel like a mausoleum. It felt like something was waking up. The grass hadn't been stepped on in months, not since the estate groundskeeper trimmed it for spring, and certainly not by small feet or soft hands. The east lawn, once designed as a children's garden, had become just another manicured part of the property, beautiful but untouched. The foam mats had long since gathered dust beneath the patio awning, toys sat in plastic crates unopened, and the ramp that led down from the terrace had never been used for anything other than deliveries. Until today. Jessica had asked for the morning nurse to help her carry the boys outside. There was no fanfare, no announcement, no therapists present. Just a fleece blanket laid gently across the grass, a few soft cushions, and the twins. Harry watched from the driveway. He hadn't planned to. He'd been returning from a canceled meeting, the kind he would have once rescheduled 6 times to avoid coming home mid-morning. But today, something in him had turned the car toward the east side of the estate instead of the garage. And there they were, Mason and Jay, not lying flat in hospital beds, not encased in monitors. They were propped gently on cushions, facing the breeze, blinking at the sky like they'd never seen it before. Jessica knelt beside them, brushing a blade of grass across Jasso's hand. His fingers curled. Mason made a sound, not a word, not a cry, just a small surprised noise, like wonder trying to figure out how to breathe. Jessica smiled. She didn't force anything. She didn't narrate. She just let the world be new around them. Harry stepped out of the car slowly. one hand resting on the hood. No one saw him. He didn't move closer. He didn't want to interrupt whatever this was. Joe reached for a dandelion. His hand missed, but his eyes didn't. They stayed locked on it as Jessica held the stem and let him try again. And then Mason, unprompted, stretched his hand toward Jessica's. This time, he touched her, not a brush, not an accident. His fingers wrapped around hers tightly with intention. Jessica didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just nodded once, like she'd been waiting for this, like it was the answer to a question she'd asked 100 quiet times. Later that afternoon, Harry came home again properly, this time through the front door, in time for his usual debrief from the staff, but no one met him. No therapist updates, no agenda, only a note taped to the refrigerator. It was a drawing. 2 stick figure leaves with little faces, one smiling, one curious. Between them, a stick figure in a yellow dress. The caption, written in looping, careful handwriting, read, "Today they reached." No explanation, no clinical terms. Harry stood there for a long time, reading those 3 words over and over. The drawing trembled slightly in the air from the overhead fan, as if the whole house was exhaling. Later that night, he placed the drawing in his desk drawer. Then he shut his laptop. He didn't reopen it. Instead, he walked upstairs, not to his study, but to the nursery. The lights were dim. Jessica had already left. The nurse sat reading in the corner. Mason and Jason were asleep, their hands loosely curled, their cheeks flushed with air and sun. Harry sat on the floor beside them, his back to the wall, arms crossed over his chest. He didn't speak, didn't try to touch them, just breathed, listened, waited. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like presence. It began with a voice memo. Harry hadn't meant to hear it. He was reviewing estate expenditures when he accidentally clicked the wrong file in Jessica's shared staff folder, a space where she uploaded cleaning checklists and supply requests, nothing more. But this wasn't a checklist. It was audio. He recognized the rustle of soft bedding, the sound of Mason babbling quietly, the faint creak of the nursery floor. Then Jessica's voice, gentle and close to the mic. "That's right, sweetheart. You can tell me, even if it's just sounds. I'm listening." Pause. "Mama." Another pause. Then a laugh. Not hers, but Jesso's, delicate and breathy, like wind brushing a wind chime. Harry froze. He listened to the whole thing twice. Then he shut his laptop and went to find her. He didn't knock, just opened the kitchen door where she was scrubbing something under the faucet, sleeves rolled, hair tied back in a scarf. She turned calmly. "Is something wrong, Mr. Rutherford?" "You recorded them." Her hands stilled. "For the nurse. She doesn't always see what I see." "You saved it in the staff folder." Jessica nodded. "I wanted someone else to believe it." Harry stepped into the room, the tile cold under his shoes. "They're calling you Mama," he said, the words sticking on his tongue like it betrayed something sacred. Jessica wiped her hands with a towel and leaned against the counter. "They don't know what a mother is, but they're saying it." She met his eyes, steady, unapologetic. "They're saying it to the person who shows up." The silence between them cracked, not with shouting, but with the kind of stillness that comes after something huge has shifted beneath the floorboards. Harry's jaw clenched. "They have a mother," he said. Jessica didn't flinch. "They had one, and she loved them. I'm not here to replace her." "You're crossing a line." Jessica folded the towel carefully, placed it beside the sink. "I'm not the one who built the line," she said. "I just didn't see a reason to keep pretending it keeps love out." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You think this is love?" he asked, sharp, desperate, the first true fracture in his tone. "Letting them cling to you like that? Letting them think?" "I didn't let them think anything," she said, gently but firmly. "They decided you weren't there." That landed harder than she meant it to, and she knew it, but she didn't take it back. Harry's hands curled at his sides, not in rage, in grief, in panic. "You think I haven't tried?" he asked, quieter now. "You think I didn't want?" "I don't think anything," Jessica said. "I see." Another silence, this one fuller, not angry, just heavy. "You want to be the one they reach for?" she asked finally. He didn't answer. Jessica stepped forward, not closer, not invading, just enough that he had to look at her directly. "Then reach first," she said. "Be what you needed someone to be for you. Be it for them." Harry's throat felt tight. Jessica walked past him slowly toward the hallway. Before she left the room, she said only this: "You can take it back. You just have to want it." She didn't slam the door. She didn't wait for a response. And the next morning, for the first time since the twins were born, Harry Rutherford didn't go to work. He sat on the nursery floor, awkward in his expensive shirt, and watched his sons sleep. When they stared, he didn't call the nurse. He reached out and waited to see if their hands would reach back. The storm rolled in quietly, not with thunder, but with a steady pressure in the air, heavy clouds settling low over the Rutherford estate like a second ceiling. Rain tapped softly against the nursery windows, a rhythmic whisper that filled the quiet without disturbing it. Harry sat on the floor again, third morning in a row. He wasn't good at it, this being still, being present. He was stiff in his joints, awkward with his hands, unsure where to look. But the boys didn't seem to mind. They didn't ask for words or performance. They didn't need him to know what to do. They just needed him there. Jessica had said it once, presence isn't a skill, it's a choice. So he kept choosing. He'd begun reading to them one page at a time, his voice lower than it used to be when he gave keynote speeches or interviews. He wasn't sure they understood the stories, but that didn't matter. Their eyes followed the movement. Sometimes their lips did too. Jessica still kept her journal, but now it rested on the windowsill, open, unhidden. Harry had even added a few notes of his own, tentative observations, nothing dramatic. Mason turned toward the sound of the bell. Jocelyn blinked in rhythm with the mobile. Small things, but real. That evening the storm picked up. Wind howled faintly through the chimney shaft. The power flickered once, briefly, and then held. The house felt smaller, wrapped in weather, safer somehow. Jessica brought in extra blankets, one for each crib, one for the rocking chair. Harry didn't leave. Around midnight, thunder cracked overhead, sharp and sudden. Mason startled. His hands twitched, his eyes flew open. A soft whimper pushed from his chest, barely audible. Then came something else, a sound, a syllable. Jessica froze. Harry sat up straighter, heart hammering. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Jessica nodded once, slowly. Mason blinked. His lips moved again, struggling to shape the air. It wasn't random. Not a cry, not mimicry. Jessica leaned closer, her voice soft. "That's him trying to say my name." Harry's throat went dry. Jessica. The boy's mouth was forming the shape of the only name he'd attached to safety, to comfort, to presence. And then, like a harmony being discovered, Jocelyn stirred in his crib and echoed the same sound, broken, breathy, but unmistakable. J. Harry looked to Jessica. She wasn't crying, but her whole face looked like something had opened. "It's not language yet," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But it's trust."
That's what speech is, at the root, a reaching out. Harry swallowed hard. He crossed the room and placed his hand gently on Mason's back, unsure if he was even allowed to, but the child didn't flinch. Jason murmured again. Jessica closed her eyes, and Harry did too. He had waited 2 years for a miracle, and it didn't come in surgery or science or some grand milliport. It came in this room, in the middle of a storm, in the smallest sound a child could make, and the unbearable weight of knowing it meant, "I'm here. I see you. I want you near." Jessica didn't say a word about the offer. It came in a neat envelope, cream cardstock, gold-trimmed, a high-end private therapy center across the state, triple the salary, housing included, flexible schedule. They'd heard about her through someone on the nursing rotation, watched footage, read notes. Empathetic instinct. The recruiter had called it a gift for connection. Jessica folded the letter and placed it at the back of her notebook. Then she went back to folding the boys' laundry. She didn't tell Harry. She didn't want to confuse clarity with pressure. And she wasn't sure what her answer would be, but the twins noticed, not in words, not in tantrums, just something subtle. Mason grew fussy in the afternoons, restless even when held. Joe stopped humming during lullabies, watching Jessica's face as if listening for something he didn't understand. They were regressing, not physically but emotionally.
The house felt it too, like the air had lost some unspoken thread. Harry noticed. He didn't say anything for days, just observed, listened. One morning, he watched from the hallway as Jessica knelt beside Mason's crib. Her hands moved slowly over his blanket, smoothing out corners that didn't need fixing. He asked, "Are you leaving?" Jessica didn't look up. "I haven't decided." "Why not?" She gave a small shrug. "They're not mine." Harry stepped into the room, crossed his arms. "They think you are." Jessica smiled sadly. "That's not the same thing." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he set a folder down on the changing table beside her. "I had it drawn up yesterday." She looked at it. Heavy cream cardstock again, but this time her name was on the front. Inside, a guardianship proposal. Partial, shared. No obligations, no legal traps. Just a space carved out in writing for what had already been true for months. Jessica flipped through the pages, her face unreadable. At the end, a handwritten note clipped to the last sheet. "You're part of this, whether or not you want a title." Jessica closed the folder. "I need to think," she said quietly. Harry nodded, of course. She stayed in the nursery that night, not out of duty, just because the rain came again and the twins had been restless. She rocked Joe gently until he slept. Mason curled up against her chest. The thunder outside was louder this time, but neither boy cried. And then it happened. Both boys stirred, pushed up on unsteady elbows and reached for her again. This time, not with open hands, but with sounds. Ma. Jessica froze. They were choosing, not out of habit, not reflex, not dependency, out of recognition. They knew who she was, and they were asking her to stay. The next morning, she returned the guardianship folder to Harry, signed. She didn't say much, just slid it across the kitchen island, her fingers brushing the edge. Harry looked down, then back at her. "Thank you," he said. Jessica nodded. They asked, and that was all it took. Not a promise, not forever. Just the house wasn't silent anymore. It wasn't loud either. It didn't echo with dramatic change or suddenly fill with the chaos of laughter. But something fundamental had shifted. There was music in the hallways now, not through the speaker system, but humming, breathy and soft. Toys stayed where the boys left them. Crayons appeared in the kitchen drawer. A paper crown sat on the windowsill for weeks before anyone thought to throw it away. The mansion had a pulse again, and so did Harry. He didn't speak about it, the shift, the fear, the way guilt still scratched behind his ribs in quiet moments. But he moved differently, slower, present. He canceled his trip to Geneva, pushed back 2 major board meetings, hired someone else to handle the estate's investments, at least for a while. He began therapy, not because someone told him to, because he couldn't keep living inside a version of himself that no longer matched his children. He didn't become perfect, didn't suddenly know how to braid hair or do sensory games or tell bedtime stories without stumbling, but he showed up. Every morning, he sat cross-legged on the nursery floor, let the twins climb over him like a jungle gym, change diapers. Clumsily, with far too many wipes, read aloud from the old children's book Caroline had written notes in, sometimes stopping mid-sentence when his throat caught. Jessica never corrected him. She just handed him the next book when he was ready. And the boys, Mason and Jay, were changing too. They didn't speak fluently, but they reached faster, looked longer, sounded out syllables with more purpose. They'd started pointing, not randomly, but with decision. They grabbed spoons, held eye contact, followed the light. On their 3rd birthday, Harry didn't plan a gala. There were no photographers, no press, just a quiet backyard gathering. Jessica baked the cake herself. 1 layer, white frosting, no writing. The boys wore matching soft blue shirts, hands sticky with icing, cheeks pink from the sun. A few family friends came, the night nurse, Caroline's sister Charlotte, who hadn't visited since the funeral but now lingered longer than expected. It wasn't a party, really, more like a confirmation that this family, this fragile constellation of people, was something real. At one point, a woman leaned down beside Jessica and smiled gently. "Are you the nanny?" Jessica looked at her, didn't respond. Jaso tottered forward, clutched Jessica's leg, and murmured, "Mama." The sound was soft, but it rippled through the group like thunder beneath velvet. Mason echoed it a beat later, "Mama." No one spoke. No one needed to. Harry looked up from where he was slicing fruit. His eyes met Jessica's. He didn't nod, didn't smile, but everything in him said yes. Yes, they see you. Yes, I do too. That night, after the guests had gone and the cake had been cleared, Harry read the twins to sleep from the notebook Caroline left behind. Jessica sat beside him, one boy against each of their shoulders, and for the first time since the night he lost everything, he didn't feel haunted. The mansion still held echoes, but now they weren't echoes of what had been lost. They were echoes of the life that had found its way back. Not perfect, but true. 6 months later, the swing set was finally installed. It sat at the far edge of the garden, just beyond the hydrangeas Caroline had planted in her first spring on the estate. 2 seats, wide, low to the ground, with adaptive harnesses and soft rubber grips. The boys didn't run to it, they didn't leap or scream, but with Jessica's help and Harry's hand steady at the small of their backs, they sat. One swing at a time. Jay first, then Mason. Harry pushed gently. Slow arcs, a creak with each rise and fall. The air was warm with the scent of sun-soaked earth. The leaves above the patio rustled quietly, and somewhere in the distance a lawnmower buzzed faintly. Not loud, not disruptive, just life carrying on. Jessica sat on the low stone bench nearby, ankles crossed, watching them. The boys were laughing. It wasn't big, theatrical laughter, just small bursts, soft, broken, real. Harry had never heard anything more sacred in his life. After a while, he slowed the swings and crouched between them. "Want to try it together?" he asked. The boys didn't answer with words, but they reached for each other. Harry lifted them gently onto the same swing, arms around both. They clung to each other, legs dangling, heads tilted in opposite directions like mirrored reflections. The swing shifted with the weight, then steadied. Jessica joined them, slipping her arms around all 3 from behind, careful but whole. No cameras, no therapists, no speeches, just the sound of wind, a creaking swing, and the layered heartbeat of a family that had been broken and chose to begin again, not with promises, just with presence.